So there's an expression about separating the wheat from the chaff. So the folks that are here on this beautiful day at 4 o'clock, we're the hardcore, right? A few people slipped out. So I've been really struggling on what to say because I had a speech, and actually, so you know, that's better, I actually had it typed and a double-spaced, very smart speech, so I wouldn't say anything to get in trouble for. And everything I said has been said to a great extent, that I wrote has been said, and I now have, you can look at my folder, about 8 different versions that I've rewritten throughout this, because I know what you probably, who wants me to repeat what you've already heard? Right. So here's what I need your help on. I'm going to be a little scattered, I'm going to jump around a little bit, because I had all these people telling me what I should say throughout the last 2 or 3 hours. You should say this, you should say that. And I couldn't keep them all in my head, so I was going to do something a little crazy, which is first I'm going to give you a list of what people said I should say. And then I'm going to try to weave it together into a coherent narrative that will take you from the Exodus story to how Minnesota is going to lead this country to a great new future. So here's the first thing, actually, nobody told me to say, but I wanted to say, which is what you are doing here is so extraordinary, and it is a model and lesson for this country about how labor, community, people of faith, all different folks work together to birth the kind of movement we did. So I think you all ought to give yourself a round of applause for that. And then everybody said to me, well, we keep hearing we need to do something. What is it that we need to do? So people have said, I need to talk about, we need to go on the offense. Folks know what it means to go on the offense? That we have to stop being curled up in a fetal position, seeing how many body blows we can take, and then we boast, well, they beat us, but we could still stand up. That's called defense. That we need to go on the offense. That second, we need an urgency about what we do. And that we need to start marrying our rhetoric about the crisis in this country for workers with our action. Do people know what I mean by that? Meaning, we say there's a crisis, but then we propose action to people that looks exactly. Am I back? Okay. If you can't hear me, tell me, because I feel really, really silly to talk and nobody could hear me. So that we need to think about how we marry our action and our words and our deeds, because part of the reason we're not inspiring folks is what we're proposing we do with the crisis sounds like exactly what we proposed before. That we actually need to think about how we are heroic, how we operate out of the highest moral place and do things we were never able to do before. And that this is about building and creating power. We're not going to convince the other side that we're right through intellectual argument. We need to create power, and in a way, we need to talk about how we create a crisis for the super rich. So take a note of that. You'll now test whether I get to all of that. That's what I'm going to try to do in my time up here. So first, let me ask you all a question. Who came into this meeting feeling hopeful that we're winning? Honestly, raise your hands. So we have 2 or 3 people here that, like me, no, seriously, that like me are born optimistic. Who came into the meeting, the summit today, feeling they understood what's going on in the economy? More people. Maybe because you understand, that's why you're not feeling hopeful. Who here feels, coming into this meeting, that we have a plan to win? Okay, we got a couple. Okay. Now let me try this. Who here, after the day's meeting, feels more hopeful? So this meeting has been worth happening. Who feels clearer on what's going on in the economy than you did before you came in? Good. And who feels that we have a plan to win, that they know coming out of this meeting what they want to do? Less. Some, but less. So that's a good start here. Earlier, everybody's talked about this idea that, in some form, that the super rich, the big banks, corporate CEOs, that they don't care, or they don't think their prosperity is tied to the middle class. Have people hit on that a lot of different ways? And I think I would just want to start with that for a second, because it's so incredibly important. And I don't want to repeat what other folks say, but I think it takes us to what our strategy has to be, which is our country's history has been that there's shared prosperity, shared growth. And I know that we may believe that for the future of the country we need a shared prosperity, we need shared growth, but I just think we need to be crystal clear. That's not what the super rich and the big corporations believe. They think things are absolutely fine. I just want to say that again. Do you think any of them really worry that there's 10% unemployment or 25% unemployment in communities of color? Do you think, I mean, as everybody went through, they're sitting on trillions in cash. They're the richest they've been in history, and I feel we're almost in like a battered spouse, where we're trying to convince them it would be good for them to help us. We're trying to intellectually convince them that it's better for the country. Who here thinks bankers are greedy? Okay. Who thinks that they gamble and that we end up picking up the pieces? They gamble. Okay. Who thinks what they're doing, as Bob Reich said, is unsustainable? Who thinks they're stupid? No, seriously, intellectually stupid. Because here is, I think, the key point, is I agree with all of you, but the richest, most powerful people in the history of the modern world think they're doing just fine. Because what happened is they did all those things, and then what did we do when they crashed the banks and when they crashed the economy? Did they suffer? There's more consolidation now than before. So I just want to start off with something. They're actually very, very smart. They're saying this is working just great. And so I think that leads to something. Who here feels we're in a crisis? Workers are in a crisis. Who thinks your neighborhood is in a crisis because folks are losing a home? Who thinks the loss of public services is a crisis? Who thinks what's happening to our children is a crisis? Do you think anybody running a big corporation would raise their hand? I'm not talking about regular corp. I'm talking about multinationals who make. So there's a crisis for us, right? Is there a crisis for them? So let's think about that. There's a crisis for us, and there's not for them. So what do we need to do? What would change their behavior? Say it again. We have to create a crisis for them. Look, I'm not a professor. I'm not an economist. I'm your friendly neighborhood union organizer, right? And what I've learned again and again and again is it's like and we've talked about it, when we unite together, like when we did the Justice for Janitors campaign, I don't know if people know much of the history, but the first 50 workers that joined the Justice for Janitors campaign in Denver, Colorado, were all arrested and deported. In Los Angeles, during our first strike in 2000, 60 people were hospitalized and 2 women miscarried after being attacked and beaten by the police. That what we found, though, is we grew stronger as we confronted those in power, and we created a crisis for them. And when we created a crisis for them, what did they do? Well, they reacted, they got violent. There's a wonderful TV footage after this police attack. My brother and I were both beaten, and they said, here are the Lerner boys recently beaten by the LAPD. But the thing I'm getting to is, all of us know that we'll change their behavior, we'll force them to negotiate if we create a crisis for them. So does anybody disagree with that? Does anybody think we're doing that now? Okay. So let me talk a little bit about how we might get there. So nobody should be mad at me here because I'm going to do amateur history just to make a point. Because there's times in history where people do incredible things, aren't there? Where people change the world and where people take a risk, where they do something they never could imagine. And at the time, they may not know how powerful it is. At the time, they may not know, but people go take the impossible and make it possible. And they take things that were accepted and make them unacceptable. So I'm going to quickly jump through history, and I'm half seriously calling this From Moses to Marriage Equality. So when was the first recorded strike? Anybody know? Somebody say it. Egypt. When Moses came to the Israelites, remember he went to the Pharaoh again and again. And did the Pharaoh let people go? So they said, we tried to convince you. I'm not going to go through all the plagues because, it was a vengeful God. But what did people do? They didn't just go on strike. They said, we're going to have our own country. We're going to go to the land of milk and honey. We're going to wander across the desert. And that story has inspired people for a generation, because what people talked about is seizing control of their own lives and acting on it. And if you just think about, just jumping around, if you think about abolitionists before the Civil War, long before the Civil War, people at great risk risked their lives. They knew slavery was wrong. They helped slaves get to freedom. They risked being vilified. They risked being jailed because it was right, not because that moment they were sure they were going to win. If you think about suffragettes, I don't know if people, we take that slavery is illegal as a given. We take that women can vote as a given, but people were spat on. They were jailed. People found something deep in their soul, and they took a risk. If you think about the freedom rides in the 50s, we talk about the sit-ins and all that in the 60s, but people went on buses when there was no Twitter or YouTube or anything, and risked their lives, and they took a moral position that helped shape the future. If you think about the gay rights movement, back from Stonewall, where people literally, they knew that when they came out of the closet, this wasn't a personal statement, this defined their life, they would lose their jobs. But because it was right, they did that. If you think about the Justice for Janitors campaign that started, when we started the Justice for Janitors campaign, people said undocumented part-time workers could never form a union. And after strikes and people getting arrested and extraordinary things, I'll never forget a meeting where somebody said to me, well, sure, janitors can form a union. Everybody knows janitors can have a union. It's just hard for other workers. Janitors changed history. Janitors showed that the poorest, the most oppressed, the seemingly weakest, that actually they had a strength because the folks who crossed from all over the world to come to America for an opportunity weren't afraid of the police. They weren't afraid to take a risk because they came here to make a better life. So I'm getting carried away. So here's the thing, is that each of those folks helped birth a movement. And they didn't do it by playing it safe. They didn't do it by asking permission. They found a way to do something that terrified them. They found something deep in their soul that let them be leaders. And who here has children? Who doesn't have children has like a brother or sister that you're so close to that you just can't imagine? Who has grandchildren? Here's the thing I've been really thinking about. Like, why do people do extraordinary things? And I remember, I'll give a little my personal history of maybe not making good choices, but I had my first kid at 19. And I was working as an extrusion machine operator. Anybody know those little cards that earrings hang on? The little plastic thing? That's what I used to make. And I was working there, my wife was pregnant, and I got fired actually in a union organizing campaign. And I remember this moment of terror. What am I going to do? I don't have a job, I have a baby on the way. And when my son was born, and I saw that miracle of life, it touched something that I didn't know I had in me, and I realized, and I don't know if all of you felt it, I would do anything for him. I would risk my life for him. I would work 3 jobs so he had opportunities. That I would do. Do people ever feel that way about your kids? I mean, if a car was running towards one of our kids, would we dive in front in a second to save our kid? And what that made me realize is that in each of us is this extraordinary ability to take risks and to do things we never imagined if we're called on to do it. And for most of our lives, it may be good enough to raise a family. It may be good enough to create opportunity for our kids, but if you believe that the richest and most powerful people in the history of the globe have decided that it's fine if things get worse, it's actually better for them if things get worse for us, then I think we have to think a little bit about how we birth a movement together. And how we have the same urgency and passion about birthing a movement to transform our country as we do about our children or our grandchildren or our brothers and sisters. Are you with me? Does this sound crazy as a sort of a way to think about this? Because I think what's happened is we've been raised and schooled that we're powerless. We've been taught that what we do has nothing, won't matter. And I think as a starting point, I'm going to go into some specific, we can talk about strategy, but we have to look back from Moses to the auto workers. You know, we romanticize when the auto workers sat in at the auto plants. The National Guard was out there with machine guns. They thought they might die, didn't they? Yep. We have to look at, if we believe our rhetoric, if we believe things are so bad, what is it we're willing to do? And if it's not starting to create a crisis for those who are in power, I don't know how we get there. And I just want to tell you a brief story about my son. We have a little ritual in our family, which is when you get to be 18, what do you do? Absolutely. So, I don't know if you know the story, but during the Justice for Janitors campaign, we were fighting this guy named Oliver Carr. He was the richest landowner in D.C. He was paying no tax. This was when the city was in bankruptcy. So we had a little idea. Why don't we park school buses across all the bridges into Washington, set up schoolrooms on the bridge, and say Oliver Carr should pay his fair share. This was 1990 or something. So this thing about the rich not paying taxes is not new. And we set it up. And anyway, so my son turned 18 then, and so he got arrested. And my youngest son, who's a lot younger, you know story time in school, where they do the circle, and the teacher said, "Does anybody have a story today?" And Jacob said, "Oh yeah, my brother went to jail yesterday." And the teacher, you know, we go to an urban school, it's not unusual for kids to go to jail. And the teacher said, "Oh, that's okay. That's okay. He'll be all right." And my son said, "We're so proud." And the teacher looked at him and he said, "What are you so proud about?" And my son said, "Because he's just like that man we've been studying." And she said, "Who's that?" He said, "Like that man who's a doctor and a king at the same time." And so that's, I think, what we have to start to find. I have no idea how much time have I talked here? I feel like anyway. So that, in a way, is what I think we have to start to find in ourselves, is how do we start thinking about, one, what we're willing to do. How are we doing on time?
Another 10 minutes.
Another 10 minutes, all right. I'll even tell a story here. So what that leads me to is, if point one is we need to create a crisis for them, point two would be we cannot do it by doing the same things we always do. And I think there's sort of 3 points I want to touch on here, which is, I think there's all sorts of good work going on in the country, but if you look about all those movements I referenced, if you look about the Arab Spring, what do all the things that are changing the world have in common?
People in the streets.
Say it again.
People in the streets.
And when the people are in the streets, are they always getting permits and getting permission and saying, do you think that, like in Egypt, they said to the police, "Oh, could we have a permit to stay in this square?" And if they had said no, they all would have gone home? Is that the first thing that, I mean, have people followed the demonstrations in Israel lately? 400,000 people in Israel, in a country of whatever, I think I figured out it's equivalent to 30 million people. It started off with 6 college kids in tents protesting the cost of housing. 400,000 people marched under a banner saying, "We want social justice." So every country where there's transformational change, people are in the streets. And what do we not have in the U.S.? Okay, this is a good crowd. Those people that left early, they're missing it. So the second thing, so I think, one, we have to be real about how we get in the streets. But then second, we can't think about this as one at a time symbolic demonstrations. You know, you have a big march on Washington. If we're talking about creating a crisis, like in Houston where Javier went to jail, does anybody know what Javier's bail was when he got arrested in Houston? Yes. Javier's bail for his 37 hours in jail, with all very nice people, was $88,888. A person. We had $40 million in bail for nonviolent civil disobedience. And it was a great moment when I called our lawyer and I said, "Bail is $800,000. She said, "That's not bad." I said, "No, it's per person." But the point was, what we did in Houston in the Janitors campaign is we won public support for the idea that the poorest people doing the hardest work needed a decent living. We identified who the bad guys were, which in this case was the big landlords and real estate agents, real estate companies who could afford to pay. And then we said, we went on strike, thousands of workers. I mean, there was a moment, I don't know if you were at this one, Javier, where people, after a couple of undocumented workers were arrested, were you there on the march on the police station? And 2,000 undocumented workers marched on the police station to demand that people be freed. And there were helicopters and riots. There was that moment where there was no fear. And the paper next day reported that people were chanting Viva la Revolución. Completely untrue. They were chanting Viva la Unión. But now why would they do that? Because they thought, oh my God, it's happening here. They're all marching in the street, and they actually let people go. So the point I'm getting to is we won in Houston is because through escalating activity, through a really smart campaign that won public support, but through sitting in again and again, by blocking the biggest streets, by bringing Houston to a standstill, we literally had a meeting with the biggest building owners and corporate guys, and they said, let's get this over, because this is not good for Houston. So I'm not talking about just randomly acting, that when we escalate, when we build in, we can actually change people's behavior. So one is, it needs to be escalating day after day. It's the difference between when you're a union organizer having a rally at lunch and having a strike. I think what we've been doing so far all over the country is we've been having rallies, and we now need to move into community-wide strikes, where day after day we do more and more activity, it gets bigger and bigger, and then this is a challenge I really want to throw out. I feel like I'm heading into the dark when I go backwards, is we need to rediscover and reinvent, and I want to stress, nonviolent civil disobedience. Microphone again? Sorry. What's that? Oh, this is not working at all? Okay. What I said, I'll say it again, is we need to rediscover and reinvent nonviolent civil disobedience and direct action. That we absolutely cannot win this struggle by playing by their set of rules. And I challenge you, oh my God, the banging thing, I'll be like a thunderous speaker, boom, boom, boom. I challenge you to show me any time in modern history where there has been a movement for progressive change, that hasn't been a core part of it. And so I think that's the moment that we're on, and the reason I talked about what's in us is most of us don't think about violating the rules. I remember the first time I was arrested, it was terrifying. But I think if we really believe that we have to create a crisis for the other side, then we have to be serious about what it takes. Could you imagine the civil rights movement if they had said, well, I don't want to get in any trouble here. I hope if I keep doing a white paper with bullets on it and footnotes on why it's unjust to have American apartheid, that it would have won. So I think there's three ingredients. There's one, a focus on corporate power, which we've talked about, which is analysis. That second, there's a commitment to escalating activity that creates a crisis for the other side. And third, there's nonviolent civil disobedience and direct action. And I don't mean the symbolic arrest where we've arranged with the police where you walk around the corner and, and then they let you go. I'm not saying we're there tomorrow, but if we believe that the richest, most powerful people want to cement and make permanent what they're doing, then we need to do that. So I just want to give you a couple examples, because sometimes I think people feel isolated. Do you think that stuff's happening around the country now? I've had my phone buzzing since I've been here, because something is starting to bubble all over the country. Did you hear about the Hershey strike? Students from all over the world came to America on a student exchange and found out they were indentured labor, and 20-year-old kids from Mongolia and all these countries went on strike. Incredible story. The other day in Los Angeles, a group of people, they were foreclosing on a woman's home. They picked up all the garbage in the neighborhood that was no longer picked up because public employees have been laid off. They put it in bags. They brought it to the bank. They put tents in the lobby. They say, I don't have a home anymore. I'm moving in. And here's all the garbage. Here's the blight that you brought to my neighborhood. There was another great event where people backed up trucks full of furniture, and they moved them into the lobby of J.P. Morgan's regional headquarters. They say, we got no place to live. We'll come live with you. And the amazing thing is, sometimes life imitates art. They overheard this was a regional headquarters of J.P. Morgan. One of the regional executives said to the cops, every moment they're here, we're losing millions of dollars. Can't you arrest them already? I got 2 minutes. Okay. So let me just touch on a couple things real quickly. Around the country, people are getting ready and have started moving in to abandoned homes. They're saying, if we don't have decent housing and there's homes that are empty and good, why don't we move into them? People are passing blight initiatives. People, just in Richmond, California, they just fine the banks millions of dollars. They fine them $1,000 a day for every day they don't clean up after themselves. There is untold incredible stuff, and I think what you're going to find starting in the middle of September is it's going to sweep the country, that more and more people are taking action. There's going to be more and more people willing in a nonviolent, moral, heroic way to take the risk of arrest. And I know in Seattle, in LA, in San Francisco, in Chicago, in New York, in Boston, we've got some stuff in Boston, in New York that's going to really be spectacular. It's all starting to happen, and I think coming out of this meeting, the challenge is, are we going to make it happen here? Because I think what you do here in Minnesota, for all the reasons we've talked about, is really critical. So I know I'm running, I have 1 minute. This may take 2 minutes, so don't shoot me. But I want to try something. Who here feels they've been part of a movement in their life? Okay. So I use the expression, I want to try to birth a movement with you right here today. And normally this takes a long time, but this is going to be a quickie labor here versus a 20-minute thing. So I'd like first, who here thinks they're the most inspiring, best organizer here? Somebody jump up who thinks they're inspiring. Can you stand up, please? And can you clap your hands in an enthusiastic way to make us all want to join your movement? Okay, hold on. No, wait a sec. Stay standing. Now, if you're the average American right now, you say, this is a nice, wonderful person, but do you think you want to, like, you're really willing to risk and take a big risk to join her if she's one person? So let's just say, the far right side of the room, let's say that all of you are part of community organizations, and that you all said, well, she's right. We need to take this on, so you all joined her. So why don't you all stand up? And then clap, all of you on the right side of, I guess it's your right, left, whatever, you know what I mean. But clap and inspire us all to join you. Clap again, all of you together. Now, if you're the average American right now, or the average anybody in the world, she did a good job, she got them going, and you're thinking, hey, that's pretty good, right? But let's say that in the middle, all the union members, you're in the middle, you're all union members, stand up, and let's say they say, well, it's about time we get out of the fetal position and we start fighting, and so all of you start clapping. So all of a sudden, we're starting to build a movement here. And then let's just have the first half of this row, you're all students. And this first, up to the first, yeah, right here, you guys. Why don't you all stand up? You're students and you're saying, man, I've been at the frat party, but something's going on here. I want to join, so let's all together. And let's end with this group. They've been sitting up there. They're suspicious or apathetic. They don't know what can work. But when you build a movement, they're Republicans. But all of a sudden, and now I'm going to really wrap it up, all of a sudden, here's what happens. They feel it in the air. They feel that we're right. They see that people are doing extraordinary things, and we're all clapping, and let's do this. We all know how we do the clap together. And they stand up. So brothers and sisters, this is our mission, this is our challenge, this is our cause. In our lifetimes, not a year, to start doing this in Minnesota, in every city around the country, we can build something extraordinary. We can create a new world from the ashes of the old, for those who know your great labor songs. This is our time. Thank you very much.